London, a city shrouded in fog, where the air is thick with mystery and the streets whisper secrets of the past. The fog rolls in from the Thames, blanketing the city in a ghostly veil, making the familiar seem strange and the ordinary extraordinary. The gas lamps flicker, casting an eerie glow that dances on the cobblestones, creating a world where shadows come alive and every corner holds a story waiting to be told, secrets hidden within its twisting alleys where the walls have ears and the cobblestones remember the footsteps of those who have walked before. These narrow passageways, with their hidden corners and dark recesses, are a labyrinth of intrigue and danger. They are the veins of the city, pulsing with the lifeblood of its inhabitants, each one a thread in the intricate tapestry of Victorian London. Gaslight flickered, casting long shadows on cobblestone streets. The light, though dim, is a beacon in the darkness, guiding the way for those brave enough to venture out into the night. It is a time when the line between reality and fantasy blurs, and the city itself becomes a character in the unfolding drama. The gaslight, with its warm golden glow, is both a comfort and a warning, illuminating the path ahead while hinting at the dangers that lurk in the shadows. It was a time of immense wealth and grinding poverty, where the opulence of the wealthy stood in stark contrast to the squalor of the poor. The streets of London were a study in contrasts, with grand mansions and elegant townhouses standing side by side with overcrowded tenements and dilapidated shacks. The rich lived lives of luxury and excess, while the poor struggled to survive, their lives a daily battle against hunger and disease. This stark divide was a reflection of the broader social and economic inequalities of the time, a reminder of the harsh realities of life in Victorian London, of scientific advancement and unwavering tradition. The era was marked by incredible progress and innovation, with new discoveries and inventions transforming every aspect of life. Yet, amidst this wave of change, there was a deep-seated adherence to tradition, a clinging to the old ways and values. This tension between the new and the old, the modern and the traditional, was a defining feature of the period, shaping the lives and experiences of those who lived through it. It was against this backdrop that Oscar Wilde unveiled his masterpiece, The Picture of Dorian Gray. The novel, with its provocative themes and striking prose, was a reflection of the complexities and contradictions of the time. Wilde, with his sharp wit and keen insight, captured the essence of an era, exploring the dark undercurrents that lay beneath the surface of Victorian society. The Picture of Dorian Gray was more than just a story. It was a mirror held up to the world, revealing the hidden truths and unspoken fears of a generation. The story, a haunting exploration of beauty, morality, and the human psyche, unfolds like a nightmare dressed in finery. It is a tale of desire and corruption, of innocence lost and the price of vanity. As we follow Dorian Gray on his journey, we are drawn into a world of decadence and decay, where the pursuit of pleasure leads to the ultimate downfall. The novel is a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the fragile nature of the human soul. In the end, The Picture of Dorian Gray is not just a story about one man's descent into darkness, but a reflection of the society that created him, a society that, like Dorian, was both beautiful and deeply flawed. At the heart of this tale stood Dorian Gray, a young man of exceptional beauty. His striking features were the talk of the town, a visage so perfect it seemed almost otherworldly. In the bustling streets of Victorian London, where the elite gathered and society's standards were set, Dorian's appearance was a beacon of aesthetic perfection. His golden hair, piercing blue eyes, and flawless skin made him the epitome of youthful allure. People would often stop and stare, mesmerized by his presence, as if he were a living work of art. His face, a canvas of perfection, captivated all who beheld it. Artists longed to capture his likeness, poets wrote verses inspired by his beauty, and the socialites of the time vied for his attention. Dorian's beauty was not just skin-deep, it was a magnetic force that drew people to him, making him the center of every gathering. His charm was irresistible and his presence was intoxicating, yet beneath this flawless exterior there lay a soul that was both innocent and vulnerable, unaware of the dark path that lay ahead. Dorian, naive and impressionable, saw his beauty as his most valuable asset. He would often spend hours gazing at his reflection, marveling at the perfection that stared back at him. The mirror became his confidant, reflecting not just his physical appearance, but also his growing obsession with youth and beauty. Influenced by the hedonistic philosophies of his mentor, Lord Henry, Dorian began to believe that beauty was the only thing worth pursuing in life. He feared the inevitable decay that time would bring, and this fear began to consume him. He was a creature of his time, a society obsessed with appearances. In the grand halls of Victorian high society, where opulence and elegance were the order of the day, Dorian's beauty was his ticket to acceptance and admiration. The elite circles he moved in placed immense value on outward appearances, often equating beauty with virtue and worth. Dorian's flawless looks granted him access to the most exclusive events where he was fawned over and adored. Yet, this superficial adulation only deepened his obsession with maintaining his youthful appearance. Little did he know his beauty would become both a blessing and a curse. As he delved deeper into a life of indulgence and excess, the portrait painted of him began to change, reflecting the corruption of his soul. While Dorian remained outwardly youthful and unblemished, the portrait grew increasingly grotesque, a stark reminder of the consequences of his actions. His once innocent heart became tainted with vanity, cruelty, and a desperate desire to preserve his looks at any cost. The true value of beauty, he would come to realize, was not in its fleeting nature, but in the integrity and goodness that lay beneath the surface. The Devil's Advocate. Lord Henry's influence. Dorian Gray, a young man of exceptional beauty, meets Lord Henry Wotton. This encounter marks the beginning of a profound transformation in Dorian's life, one that will lead him down a path of self-discovery and moral ambiguity. Lord Henry, a charming yet cynical man, introduces Dorian to a life of hedonism. He speaks of a philosophy that glorifies the pursuit of pleasure and the rejection of societal norms, captivating Dorian with his eloquent words and magnetic personality. He preaches the pursuit of pleasure above all else. To Lord Henry, life is a series of moments to be savoured, each one an opportunity to indulge in the senses and seek out new experiences, regardless of the consequences. Dorian, easily influenced, falls prey to Lord Henry's poisonous words. He begins to see the world through a different lens, one where beauty and pleasure are the ultimate goals, and moral considerations are secondary. He begins to see beauty as the ultimate goal, embarking on a quest to satisfy his every desire. The allure of a life filled with luxury and indulgence becomes irresistible, and Dorian is drawn deeper into Lord Henry's world. Dorian's innocence starts to fade. The once pure and untainted young man begins to grapple with the darker aspects of his newfound philosophy, questioning the cost of his relentless pursuit of pleasure. He dives headfirst into a world of sensual experiences. From lavish parties to intimate encounters, Dorian seeks out every form of pleasure, pushing the boundaries of his own desires and testing the limits of his morality. His pursuit of pleasure becomes an obsession. The more he indulges, the more he craves, and the line between satisfaction and excess begins to blur. Morality becomes a distant whisper as he embraces a life devoid of consequences, or so he thinks. The repercussions of his actions are not immediately apparent, but they linger in the shadows, waiting to emerge. Lord Henry's influence grows stronger with each passing day. His words echo in Dorian's mind, shaping his thoughts and guiding his actions. As Dorian becomes more entangled in the web of hedonism, he encourages Dorian's self-indulgence, fueling the fire of his desires. With each new experience, Dorian becomes more detached from his former self, losing sight of the values he once held dear. The line between right and wrong blurs. Dorian's actions become increasingly reckless, and the consequences of his choices begin to catch up with him, threatening to unravel the life he has built. Dorian's soul begins its descent into darkness. The once bright and promising young man is now a shadow of his former self, consumed by the very desires that once seemed so alluring. A world of sinful delights. London becomes Dorian's playground, a city where every corner holds a new temptation, every street a new adventure. He immerses himself in a whirlwind of lavish parties and decadent gatherings. Opulence surrounds him, expensive wines flow freely, and the finest delicacies are always within reach. The air hangs heavy with the scent of exotic flowers, their fragrances mingling to create an intoxicating atmosphere. Music and laughter fill the grand halls of the city's most exclusive estates. The melodies of live orchestras and the rhythm of jazz bands echo through the night. Dorian, the life of every party, indulges in every pleasure imaginable. His charm and charisma draw people to him like moths to a flame. He surrounds himself with artists, musicians and socialites, each one adding a new layer to his extravagant lifestyle. Each night is an extravagant display of excess, with fireworks lighting up the sky and banquets that seem to go on forever. His senses are constantly ignited by the vibrant colors, the rich tastes, and the melodious sounds that surround him. His appetite for pleasure knows no bounds. He craves more with each passing day, never satisfied, always yearning. But beneath the surface of gaiety lies a darkness. The laughter rings hollow, and the smiles often seem forced. The beauty that once captivated Dorian now seems superficial, a mere facade that hides the emptiness within. The constant pursuit of pleasure leaves a void within him, a gnawing emptiness that no amount of indulgence can fill. He is left to ponder the true cost of his hedonistic lifestyle. From laughter to a haunting silence. As the nights of revelry blur, an eerie silence descends. The echoes of laughter fade into a haunting stillness. Dorian finds himself alone. The weight of his actions begins to press down on him. The guilt festers. The once vibrant colors of his world turn muted and dull. The intoxicating scents of his former life transform into a suffocating stench. A sense of emptiness pervades his existence. The pleasure he so desperately sought has lost its allure. His once bright eyes now reflect a growing despair. He realizes the true cost of his hedonistic desires, but it is too late. He is trapped in a vicious cycle of indulgence and regret. Section 4. A pristine mask of corruption. While Dorian's soul withers, his physical appearance remains unchanged. Time seems to have no power over him. His youthful beauty endures, a stark contrast to the decay festering within. He becomes an enigma. People marvel at his agelessness, they envy his eternal youth, unaware of the terrible price he pays for his unblemished facade. His beauty, once a gift, becomes a curse, a constant reminder of his corruption. Years pass, decades even. Dorian remains untouched by time, forever frozen in his youthful prime, but his heart grows colder. The chasm between his pristine exterior and his rotting soul widens. Section 5. The portrait's grotesque transformation. Hidden away in the musty attic of his grand home lies a portrait. This portrait, shrouded in dust and cobwebs, is not just any painting. It is a reflection of a life lived in shadows, a testament to the dark secrets that fester within the walls of this grand house. A portrait of Dorian Gray as he once was. Captured in the prime of his youth, the painting shows a young man with a face full of hope and innocence, untouched by the ravages of time and sin, young, innocent and full of promise. His eyes gleam with the light of dreams yet to be realized, and his smile radiates a purity that seems almost otherworldly. But the portrait holds a dark secret. It is not just a mere representation of Dorian's outer beauty, but a canvas that absorbs the darkness of his soul. It bears the burden of Dorian's sins, each deceitful act, every moment of cruelty, and all his selfish desires are etched into the fabric of the painting. With every act of cruelty, every selfish desire indulged, the portrait changes. The once serene and beautiful image begins to morph, reflecting the corruption of Dorian's soul. What was once a masterpiece of beauty now becomes a canvas of horror. The transformation is slow but relentless, each stroke of the brush revealing a new layer of monstrosity. Brush strokes warp and twist into grotesque shapes. The features that once defined youth and vitality now contort into a hideous mask of decay. The once vibrant colors turn sickly and pale. The lively hues that once brought the portrait to life now fade into a ghostly pallor, mirroring the degradation of Dorian's spirit. The portrait becomes a mirror reflecting his true self. It is a haunting reminder of the man he has become, a stark contrast to the facade he presents to the world. It serves as a constant reminder of the monster he has become. The once handsome face now bears the marks of every sin, every moral transgression, a monster hidden behind a mask of eternal youth. To the world, Dorian remains the picture of perfection, but the portrait reveals the truth. Dorian cannot escape the horrifying truth staring back at him from the canvas. Each glance at the portrait is a confrontation with his own corrupted soul, a chilling reminder of the price of his eternal youth. Section 6. The dark secret in the attic. The portrait becomes Dorian's deepest, darkest secret. He hides it away, shielding it from prying eyes. No one can know the truth. No one can see the physical manifestation of his sins. He becomes its prisoner, bound to it, haunted by it. Fear consumes him, fear of discovery, fear of judgment, fear of the consequences of his actions. The attic, once a forgotten space, becomes his sanctuary and his prison. It is here that he confronts his demons. It is here that he grapples with the weight of his choices. Section 7. The price of vanity and vice. Dorian Gray's story is a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the consequences of a life lived in the pursuit of fleeting pleasures. His hedonistic desires led him down a path of destruction, leaving his soul withered and his spirit broken. The pursuit of beauty above all else proved to be his downfall. His obsession with youth and pleasure blinded him to the true meaning of life. He sacrificed his integrity and his morals at the altar of vanity and vice. In the end, Dorian Gray paid the ultimate price for his sins. His story serves as a timeless warning against the allure of superficiality and the corrosive nature of unchecked desire. London, foggy, oppressive. The city seemed to breathe with a life of its own, the mist curling around the cobblestones like a living entity. It was a place where secrets thrived and shadows whispered tales of forgotten sins. Dorian Gray, once a vision of youthful innocence, now a prisoner of his own gilded cage. His once bright eyes now held a haunted look, a reflection of the darkness that had taken root in his soul. The opulence around him felt like a mockery of the purity he had once embodied. He moved through society like a phantom, a charming smile masking the darkness within. To the world he was the epitome of grace and charm, but beneath the surface a storm raged. Each smile, each laugh was a carefully crafted lie, hiding the torment that gnawed at his very being. His secret, hidden in the attic, a portrait bore the weight of his sins. The painting, once a masterpiece of youthful beauty, had become a grotesque reflection of his corrupted soul. Each stroke of the brush now seemed to scream with the agony of his misdeeds. Basil Hallward, the artist who had captured Dorian's youthful beauty, remained a persistent shadow in Dorian's life. He had poured his heart and soul into that portrait, never imagining the dark path it would lead them down. Basil's love for his art was now tainted by the horror of what it had become. Haunted by his creation, Basil felt an unwavering responsibility for Dorian's soul. He spent countless nights in deep contemplation, surrounded by unfinished paintings that seemed to mock his failure. The weight of his guilt was a constant companion, a shadow that never left his side. He had glimpsed the darkness in Dorian, a darkness that chilled him to the bone. The once innocent boy he had known was now a stranger, a creature of the night. Basil's fear was not just for Dorian, but for the part he had played in his downfall. Their friendship, once vibrant and alive, had become strained. The bond that had once brought them joy was now a source of pain. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly were now filled with tension and unspoken accusations. Dorian, consumed by his own desires, distanced himself from the one man who truly cared for him. The allure of his hedonistic lifestyle was too strong, pulling him further into the abyss. Each step he took away from Basil was a step deeper into his own damnation. Basil, sensing the shift, grew increasingly concerned. He watched from a distance, his heart heavy with worry. The changes in Dorian were undeniable, and the artist feared for his friend's very soul. He knew he had to act, but the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. He knew the portrait held the key to Dorian's transformation. The painting was more than just a work of art, it was a window into Dorian's soul. Basil believed that if he could confront the truth hidden within the canvas, he might be able to save his friend from the darkness. One evening, Basil sought out Dorian. He needed answers. The rumors surrounding Dorian's debauchery had reached a fever pitch, and Basil refused to believe them without a fight. He knocked on the heavy wooden door, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The rumors surrounding Dorian's debauchery had reached a fever pitch, and Basil refused to believe them without a fight. He confronted Dorian, demanding the truth. The conversation was intense, filled with accusations and denials. Basil's desperation was palpable, his love for Dorian driving him to the brink. He found Dorian in his study, a place that once radiated warmth, now cold and uninviting. The room once filled with laughter and light was now a tomb of memories. Dorian sat alone, the shadow of his former self, the weight of his sins pressing down on him like a suffocating shroud. Dorian, Basil's voice was low, laced with concern. "The things I hear, they can't be true." Dorian stiffened, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Gossip is a wicked thing, Basil. You should know better than to indulge it." Basil pressed on, his voice shaking with emotion. "These are more than just rumors, Dorian. These are accusations. People are saying you've destroyed lives." Dorian laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "And what if they are? What business is it of yours?" He turned away, his voice laced with venom. "You should leave, Basil. Your presence here is unwelcome." Basil refused to back down. He had come too far, invested too much in Dorian's well-being to let him slip away. He stepped closer, his eyes fixed on Dorian's face. "I painted that portrait, Dorian. I saw something in you, something pure and good. What happened?" Dorian's composure cracked. He spun around, his eyes blazing with fury. "Get out, leave me alone." Driven by a desperate need for answers, Basil pushed further. He had to see the portrait to understand the depth of Dorian's transformation. With a swift movement, he lunged for the attic door, ripping it open. Section 4. The Weight of Sin. The air in the attic was thick with dust and the stench of decay. It was as if the room itself had absorbed the sins of its inhabitants, holding on to them like a dark secret. The walls seemed to whisper tales of sorrow and regret, and the floorboards creaked under the weight of untold stories. Basil stepped inside, his heart pounding in his chest. The oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on him, making each breath a laborious task. He could feel the darkness closing in, wrapping around him like a suffocating shroud. He approached the portrait cautiously, each step echoing in the silence. The room seemed to grow colder with each step, the air thickening with an almost tangible sense of dread. His mind raced with thoughts of what he might find, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality. As he drew closer, he gasped in horror. The sight before him was more grotesque than his darkest nightmares. His breath caught in his throat, and a chill ran down his spine. The once radiant face of Dorian Gray was gone, replaced by a grotesque mockery of its former self. The portrait was no longer a mere painting, it was a living testament to Dorian's corruption. Every line, every shadow, every twisted feature told a story of moral decay and unrepentant sin. The portrait was a canvas of sin, every dark deed, every cruel act etched onto its surface. It was as if the very essence of Dorian's soul had been transferred onto the canvas, leaving behind a monstrous reflection of his true self. The eyes stared back at him, filled with a malevolence that chilled him to the bone. They seemed to follow his every move, judging him, condemning him. It was as if the portrait itself was alive, a sentient being born of darkness and sin. Dorian, consumed by rage and fear, lunged at Basil. His movements were wild, driven by a desperate need to silence the one person who knew his darkest secret. The room erupted in chaos as the two men struggled, their shadows dancing on the walls like spectres of their former selves. "I told you to leave!" he screamed, his voice raw with desperation. The words echoed through the attic, a haunting reminder of the man Dorian once was and the monster he had become. Basil stumbled back, horrified by the monster Dorian had become. His mind reeled with the realization that the friend he once knew was gone, replaced by a creature of pure malevolence. He tried to speak, to reason with his former friend, but the words caught in his throat. The weight of the moment was too much to bear, and he could only watch in despair as the darkness consumed them both. Section 5. Desperate Measures. In a moment of blind fury, fueled by years of pent-up guilt and self-loathing, Dorian grabbed a palette knife from a nearby table. He lunged at Basil, the blade flashing in the dim light. A scream pierced the silence, followed by a sickening thud. Dorian stood frozen, the bloody knife trembling in his hand. Basil lay at his feet, his eyes staring blankly up at the attic ceiling. The silence was deafening. Panic surged through Dorian. He had to get rid of the body, conceal his crime, but first he had to deal with the portrait. It was the only witness to his heinous act, the only tangible evidence of his descent into darkness. Section 6. The final confrontation. He turned towards the portrait, his mind racing. He couldn't destroy it, not while it held his secret. He had to find a way to make it right, to undo the years of corruption. With trembling hands, he picked up a nearby rag and began to frantically wipe at the canvas. He scrubbed at the paint, desperate to erase the evidence of his sins. But the portrait remained unchanged. The grotesque image stared back at him, mocking his futile attempts at redemption. Driven to the brink of madness, he grabbed the palette knife once more. He raised it above his head, ready to strike the canvas and silence the accusing eyes forever. But as he brought the blade down, he hesitated. Section 7. The price of vanity. In that moment of hesitation, reality crashed down upon him. The weight of his choices, the vanity that had driven him to this point, all became painfully clear. He stood there, paralyzed by the realization of what he had become. He couldn't escape his past, couldn't erase the consequences of his actions. Every step he took echoed with the memories of his misdeeds. Each photograph a testament to the life he had squandered. The hallways seemed to stretch endlessly, a labyrinth of his own making. The portrait was a reflection of his soul, a constant reminder of the price of his vanity. Each crack in the paint, each line on the canvas mirrored the corruption within him. It was as if the very essence of his being was laid bare for all to see. With a strangled cry, he plunged the knife into his own chest. The act was both a final defiance and a desperate plea for redemption. The pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the torment of his conscience. A look of shock and then a strange peace washed over his face as he collapsed to the floor. The agony was replaced by a serene acceptance, as if he had finally found the release he had been seeking for so long. The attic was silent once more. The echoes of his final moments faded into the stillness, leaving behind only the quiet hum of the night. The old furniture stood as silent witnesses to the tragic end of a man consumed by his own vanity. Dust motes danced in the pale moonlight that filtered through the grimy window. The scene was almost ethereal, a stark contrast to the darkness that had just unfolded. It was as if the universe itself was offering a moment of quiet reflection, and on the canvas the portrait of Dorian Gray shimmered, the grotesque features fading, replaced by the image of a young man, forever frozen in a moment of youthful innocence. The transformation was almost magical, a visual representation of the curse being lifted. The curse was lifted, the debt paid. But at what cost? The room, now empty and eerily quiet, seemed to hold its breath, as if pondering the same question. The portrait, now restored, was a haunting reminder of the price one pays for vanity and the fleeting nature of beauty.